Blessings, God's beloved. Welcome to a start of a new week of devotions. We start or begin this week with Psalm 142. With my voice I cry to the Lord. With my voice I make supplication to the Lord. I pour out my complaint before him, and I tell my trouble before him. When my spirit is faint, you know my way. In the path where I walk, they have hidden a trap for me. Look on my right hand and see. There is no one who takes notice of me. No refuge remains to me. No one cares for me. I cry to you, O Lord, and I say you are my refuge, my portion in the land of the living. Give heed to my cry, for I am brought very low. Save me from my persecutors, for they are too strong for me. Bring me out of prison, so that I may give thanks to your name. The righteous will surround me, for you will deal bountifully with me. So my Bible tells me that this was a prayer that David wrote or spoke, and perhaps wrote down later, or at least it was attributed to him when he was in a cave. I don't know if you have one of those Bibles that has superscriptions to it as well, but if you do, it probably says the same thing. And in this case, David, after he was anointed as king, or after he was chosen to be king, when Saul had failed, he was on a 10-year, I think, journey of persecution and being chased by King Saul, because King Saul was not willing or ready to give up his throne to David. And David was best friends with King Saul's brother or son, and he was also in the courts of King Saul and was very close to King Saul. And when King Saul's jealousy was sparked, when David was chosen to be king, he set out to destroy and to kill David. And so he was chased all over the Palestine area until he eventually became king. And so you can sense the angst in this psalm and in this prayer as he's crying out to God. And it's very familiar refrains that we have read in many of the psalms that we have already gone through. He's crying out to the Lord. His complaint is before him. His spirit is faint. His enemies have hidden a trap for him. No one is taking notice. He has no place to go, nowhere to turn. He's finally crying out to God and recognizing that God is the only source of refuge for him and the only hope in the land of the living. And a request again to be rescued from persecutors and brought out of a metaphorical prison. David feels like he is trapped at this point. And then the final refrain of the righteous will surround me, for you deal bountifully with me. So these are not new topics that we haven't covered before, but it is good for us. It is good as a reminder for us that if and when there are times, and certainly there have been times in our lives where we felt as if we are prisoners, not physically, not literally, most of us, but metaphorically, as if we are trapped. And certainly that is the time that we're experiencing right now, though maybe we are becoming more accustomed to 7 months of being in quarantine and social distancing and all of that. It does have a very heavy and restrictive feeling to us, certainly something that can bring us anxiety and anxiousness and even the fear that comes with the thought of contracting COVID or somebody we know contracting COVID. And a good reminder again of who is it that we can turn to in times of difficulty and challenge in our lives. And we certainly have friends and family that will support us in that, but none of them have the same kind of authority or sovereignty that God has in our world and in our lives. And none of them are like God, although we do love some of our friends and family as much as any human can love another human being. They are limited because of their humanity and because they're not God. And as I've mentioned and said over and over again, it is quite remarkable that we have a God, the powerful, almighty, all-knowing, ever-present God, who takes notice of us, as David writes in verse 4, who cares about us more than any other person on earth could possibly care for us. And then God even knows our heart, knows what's in our heart, and knows when our spirit is troubled and faint, and that we could come to him with those complaints. And God doesn't see it as being whiny or not being strong enough. Just as a child, when we get hurt, we go to our parents, and that comfort that comes from being in the presence of and in the arms of our parent brings us that sense of comfort that there is something greater, someone greater who cares for us deeply, and that everything's going to be okay in the end. And that's true for us as well with God, that in the end everything will be okay, and at some point trials do end and we can move forward. But to get through them and to endure the difficulties that we face in this life, God is the best source of our hope and our refuge. And He never grows tired of hearing from us. He never grows tired of our prayers. He never grows tired of our complaints. And God knows our heart. He knows what we're experiencing. And that's one of the many remarkable things about Jesus Christ, is because He was human as well as divine, He knows the human experience. And so it is something that is relatable. And God is very relatable to us in this life and in our trials and also in our triumphs. So if and when you are started to experience trials, or even if you are just fed up with everything that's been happening over the last 6 or 7 months, and you need a place of comfort, a place of refuge, you can find that in God, because God is always present and He's always there. And you can do it through worship, you can do it through prayer, you can do it through study, through giving, through service, whatever it might be, in order to connect us more deeply with God and to remind us of just how special we are in God's eyes. That's our devotion for today. Tomorrow we have Psalm 143. Until then, be well